don't like stuff.
Even though it's really just a bunch of circles with letters in them, except for Josie.
Josie always shows it.
We just like to look. Kane says, "Here's my face," and he gave you a smiley.
Wow, okay.
Kane, we appreciate you.
Wow.
We appreciate your sense of humor more than anything. All right. Hatchet. All right. Ha 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 ha. I love you too.
We have to show our face. Show your face, Ken.
Okay, or we're not going to have the screaming and yelling and crazy today.
What chapter?
We are on chapter 14, and we're hopping right into it today.
Oh, yeah.
Zeke, Lily, you guys got all caught up? You read all of 13? Okay. So when we left off, there was one question, I think, on...
Ken just came on and showed an apple. Wait, what?
Okay. There was one question on yesterday's set of questions that a handful of people, I'd say at least half, you wrote something that wasn't incorrect, but you also wrote something that wasn't exactly correct based on what it said in the text. The very final question on yesterday's thing said, what kind of hope did Brian have? And so some of you put something about hope, like that he could do it on his own, hope that it was self-respecting, hope that he was proud of himself. But Grayson put tough hope, and that was the answer I was actually looking for. The very last sentence of chapter 13. The very last sentence of chapter 13 said tough hope. He thought that, and I am full of tough hope. Why did he call it tough hope? Maggie, why is he calling it tough hope?
Because, like tough hope, but I completely forgot what I was going to say.
Sean, why is it tough hope?
Because, like, he survived for so long. It's hope
He's-
that he's going to survive. It's not hope
He's
that
survived for so long. He's hopeful he's going to continue surviving. And he said he knows that this is his new life. This is his new normal. He kind of gave up on hope for being rescued. And now he's got this tough hope. Hope he can do it. Like, it's going to be hard, but he's going to dig in and he's going to get it done, right? No matter what. So that's where we left off. He's got this tough hope. Now, based on how this book has been going, and yesterday we said it's kind of been a roller coaster. He's up, he's down, he's up, he's down. Right now he's got this tough hope. Is he up or is he down? He's up. What's going to happen in chapter 14? Are we going to stay up, you think?
No.
Well, it may go down just a little, but not a lot.
Okay, Grayson's hopeful that maybe it only goes down a smidge, maybe none at all.
I prefer
Okay.
to go up more, but if it goes down, I think it'd be more.
All right, so here we go. Chapter 14, mistakes. Small mistakes could turn into disasters. Funny little mistakes could snowball so that while you were still smiling at the humor, you could find yourself looking at death. In the city, if he made a mistake, usually there was a way to rectify it, make it all right. If he fell on his bike and sprained a leg, he could wait for it to heal. If he forgot something at the store, he could find other food in the fridge. Now it was different, and all so quick, all incredibly quick. If he sprained a leg here, he might starve before he could get around again.
Miss Bab, you're kind of glitchy.
I'm kind of glitchy today.
Yeah, like your picture is really blurry, and then for just a second, we couldn't hear you.
It's because of the snow.
I'm going to blame the snow, and the computer is giving up and having a snow day.
Josie has to go.
You want me to go close the other one?
Okay. I can get off and get back on real quick and see if that fixes it.
There's always computer problems.
All right, let me do that real quick. So
Wait, why did you close it?
thanks, Parker. Okay, hopefully this is a little bit. Is this better, Josie? Okay, good. All right, mistakes. Found food in the fridge. Now it's different. Okay. If he missed while he was hunting, or if the fish moved away, he might starve. If he got sick, really sick, so he couldn't move, he might starve. Mistakes. Early in the new time, he had learned that most important thing, the truly vital knowledge that drives all creatures in the forest. Food is all. Food was simply everything. All things in the woods, from insects to fish to bears, were always, always looking for food. It was the great single driving influence in nature, to eat. All must eat. But the way he learned it almost killed him. His second new night, stomach full of fish and the fire smoldering in the shelter, he had been sound asleep when something, he thought later it might be smell, had awakened him. Near the fire, completely unafraid of the smoking coals, completely unafraid of Brian, a skunk was digging where he had buried eggs. There was some sliver of a moon, and in the faint pearl light, he could see the bushy tail, the white stripes down the back, and he had nearly smiled. He did not know how the skunk had found the eggs, some smell, perhaps some tiny fragment of shell had left a smell, but it looked almost cute, its little head down and its little tail up as it dug and dug, kicking the sand back.
I would run.
Sean says he would run.
You get sprayed.
If you startle a skunk, what's going to happen?
They'll spray you.
They'll spray you. Okay? So right now, Brian's kind of sitting back admiring the cute little skunk. Is this one of those small mistakes that you think he might be referring to? Okay, so maybe. But those were his eggs, not the skunk's. Yeah, Josie says she's going to stay still. And the half smile had been quickly replaced with fear that he would lose his food. And he had grabbed a handful of sand and thrown it at the skunk. Get out of here! He was going to say more, some silly human words, but in less than half a second, the skunk had snapped its little rear end up, curved the tail over, and sprayed Brian with a direct shot aimed at his head from less than 4 feet away. In the tiny confines of his little shelter, the effect was devastating. The thick, sulfurous, rotten odor filled the small room, heavy, ugly, and stinking. The corrosive spray that hit his face seared into his lungs and eyes, blinding him. He screamed and threw himself sideways, taking the entire wall of the shelter, screamed and clawed out of the shelter, and ran to the shore of the lake. Stumbling and tripping, he scrambled into the water and slammed his head back and forth, trying to wash his eyes, slashing at the water to clear his eyes. 100 funny cartoons he'd seen about skunks, cute cartoons about the smell of skunks, cartoons to laugh at and joke about. But when the spray hit, there was nothing funny about it. He was completely blind for almost 2 hours, a lifetime. He thought that he might be permanently blind, or at least impaired, and that would have been the end. As it was, the pain in his eyes lasted for days, bothered him after that for 2 weeks. The smell in the shelter, in his clothes, and in his hair was still there now, almost a month and a half later.
I'd go find the lake. They wouldn't do it.
Yes.
I didn't bring this water bottle up here.
Okie dokie.
Why was that so loud?
Okay. His hair was still there. The smell was still in his hair almost a month and a half later. And he had nearly smiled. Mistakes. Smiling at the skunk, he considers that mistake. Food had to be protected. While he was in the lake trying to clear his eyes, the skunk went ahead and dug up the rest of the turtle eggs and ate every one. Licked all the shells clean and couldn't have cared less that Brian was thrashing around in the water like a dying carp. The skunk had found food and it was taking it, and Brian was paying for a lesson. Protect food and have a good shelter. Not just a shelter to keep the wind and rain out, but a shelter to protect, a shelter to make him safe. The day after the skunk, he set about making a good place to live. Yeah, Zeke.
If he was like, this like is weird because like he threw the hatchet at the porcupine and like fought off the moose with a hatchet, but then there's a skunk and he throws sand at it.
Okay, so Zeke says Brian is wasn't really thinking things through. Okay, he
What is the sand gonna do?
threw
to make it
a hatchet at the porcupine, and then he has a skunk. He actually sees the skunk, knows what it is, and throws sand at it.
Like, you think there's dirt?
So, yeah.
Skunk, he's violent.
All right. Anyway, all right. The basic idea had been good. The place for his shelter was right, but he just hadn't gone far enough. He'd been lazy. But now he knew the second most important thing about nature, what drives nature. Food was first, but the work for the food went on and on. Nothing in nature was lazy. He had tried to take a shortcut and paid for it with his turtle eggs, which he had come to like more than chicken eggs from the store. They had been fuller somehow, had more depth to them. He set about improving his shelter by tearing it down. From dead pines up the hill, he brought down heavier logs and fastened several of them across the opening, wedging them at the top and burying the bottoms in the sand. Then he wove long branches in through them to make a truly tight wall, and still not satisfied, he took even thinner branches and wove those into the first weave. When he was at last finished, he could not find a place to put his fist through. It all held together like a very stiff woven basket. He judged the door opening to be the weakest spot, and here he took special time to weave a door of willows in so tight a mesh that no matter how a skunk tried, or Porcupine, he thought, looking at the marks in his leg, it could not possibly get through. He had no hinges, but by arranging some cut-off limbs at the top in the right way, he had a method to hook the door in place. And when he was in and the door was hung, he felt relatively safe. A bear, something big, could still get in by tearing at it, but nothing small could bother him, and the weave of the structure still allowed the smoke to filter up through the top and out.
Wait, but how does he get in and out?
Well, he can unhook the door and get in and out. He's got a door he made. All in all, it took him 3 days to make the shelter, stopping to shoot fish and eat as he went, bathing 4 times a day, and try and get the smell from the skunk to leave. When his house was done, finally done right, he turned to the constant problem, food. It was all right to hunt and eat, or fish and eat, but what happened if he had to go a long time without food? What happened when the berries were gone and he got sick or hurt, or, thinking of the skunk, laid up temporarily? He needed a way to store food, a place to store it, and he needed food to store. Mistakes. He tried to learn from the mistakes. He couldn't bury food again, couldn't leave it in the shelter, because something like a bear could get at it right away. It had to be high somehow, high and safe. Above the door to the shelter, up the rock face about 10 feet, was a small ledge that could make a natural storage place, unreachable to animals, except that it was unreachable to him as well. A ladder, of course, he needed a ladder, but he had no way to fashion one, nothing to hold the steps on, and that stopped him until he found a dead pine with many small branches still sticking out. Using his hatchet, he chopped the branches off so they stuck out 4 or 5 inches up, all up along the log. Then he cut the log off about 10 feet long and dragged it down to his shelter. It was a little heavy, but dry, and he could manage it. And when he propped it up, he found he could climb to the ledge with ease, though the tree did roll from side to side a bit as he climbed. Yeah, Zeke.
Oh yeah, there's this thing you can you can make a shelter, it's a simple one. Well, okay, no, that's okay. But my other thing is
He never minded himself after he told a story. All right, continue.
I feel like he's just leaving the animals alone. But it would be smarter to harvest the animals because they have hide and meat. There's a lot of it.
Zeke said so far he noticed that Brian has been leaving the animals mostly alone, but
There wasn't this. He thought he saw them.
you read ahead, didn't you?
He read ahead.
He read
My
ahead.
brother
I
was
know he
telling
read
me
ahead
about it
based on
last
the comments
night.
he's already made today. Thank you. All right. Anyway, what Zeke said is so far. Doesn't matter. Doesn't really matter.
I promise that I didn't read that.
Okay. So Zeke said so far Brian has left the animals alone. However, it would make sense to go after some of these animals because not only would he have meat, different meat variety, but he could use their skin for a hide Jason says for clothing or something.
Or
That's a pretty
Miss Bass.
smart idea, actually.
Maybe.
Or a blanket.
Or like something to lay on.
Yeah, but you have to tan the hide, and that takes several months.
Okay. All right. So let's just see if Brian's gonna figure this out. All right. I have no idea. Okay, his food shelf, as he thought of it, had been covered with bird manure, and he carefully scraped it clean with sticks. He had never seen birds there, but that was probably because the smoke from his fire went up right across the opening, and they didn't like smoke. Still, he had learned, and he took time to weave a snug door for the small opening with green willows, cutting it so it jammed in tightly. And when he finished, he stood back and looked at the rock face, his shelter below, the food shelf above, and allowed a small bit of pride to come. Not bad, he had thought. Not bad for somebody who used to have trouble greasing the bearings on his bicycle. Not bad at all. Mistakes. He'd made a good shelter and food shelf, but he had no food except for fish and the last of the berries. And the fish, as good as they still tasted then, were not something he could store. His mother had left some salmon out by mistake one time when they were on an overnight trip to Cape Hesper to visit relatives, and when they got back, the smell filled the whole house. There was no way to store fish.
Yeah, there is.
Not without a fridge. At least he thought no way to store them dead. But as he looked at the weave of his structure, a thought came to him and he moved down to the water. He had been putting the waste from the fish back in the water, and the food had attracted hundreds of new ones. I wonder. They seemed to come easily to the food, at least the small ones. He had no trouble now shooting them, and had even speared one with his old fish spear now that he knew to aim low. He could dangle something in his fingers and they came right up to it. It might be possible, he thought, might just be possible to trap them, make some kind of pond. To his right, at the base of the rock bluff, there were piles of smaller rocks that had fallen from the main chunk, splinters and hunks, from double fist size to some as large as his head. He spent an afternoon carrying rocks to the beach and making what amounted to a large pin for holding live fish. 2 rock arms that stuck out 15 feet into the lake and curved together at the end. Where the arms came together, he left an opening about 2 feet across, and then he sat on the shore and waited. When he had first started dropping the rocks, all the fish had darted away. But his fish trash pile of bones and skin and guts was in the pond area, and the prospect of food brought them back. Soon, under an hour, there were 30 or 40 small fish in the enclosure, and Brian made a gate by weaving small willows together in a fine mesh and closed them in. "Fresh fish," he had yelled. "I have fresh fish for sale." Storing live fish to eat later had been a major breakthrough, he thought. It wasn't just keeping from starving, it was trying to save ahead, think ahead. Of course, he didn't know then how sick he would get of fish. Okay.
Oh, are we reading?
Hang on. No. I'm going to stop here today. Hang on. Yeah, Z.
I think he's going to at some point run out of resources. So I think he should make landmarks or something and explore them.
All right. Zeke is worried that he's going to run out of resources right around his little shelter, and so he's going to need to start making marks so that he can make a trail and start exploring further out. Not a bad idea, especially for somebody with tough hope that he's going to be there a while.
And I did not read ahead.
I think Zeke read ahead, but he's denying it.
No, I didn't.
I know based on a comment he made that he's read ahead. But it's okay. I still love you. He swears he didn't read ahead.
Are we making a missing poster?
Okay. Okay, so today you've got a vocabulary word and you've got 3 questions, and then we are making a missing poster for Brian.
Yay!
He might have lost hope that he's getting rescued, but what if they are still looking? So take this seriously. I am worried that a few might not. You are, and I also know we were just at art yesterday, that you guys are working on a self-portrait thing. So you don't have a face to trace on here like you did, but I want you to like seriously try and draw Brian.
Oh, I know.
Okay. And do you need his whole body, or do you need, like, usually when you see a missing poster, it's like
Just their head.
headshot, because that's the main, you want more detail on their face. Okay. So drawing doesn't have to be perfect. Am I expecting all of you to be like
No.
Miss Clontz level artistry or Kendall Cole level artistry? I'm not expecting that. Do your best. And then disappearance theory. I want like several sentences about how you think he disappeared. Now, keep in mind, we're the people that aren't in Canada. We're maybe his parent, or maybe we're his dad or his mom. We have no idea. We just know that he got on a plane and was never heard from again, right? So at the top, you got disappearance theory. That is, how do you think he disappeared? So you're going to write how we think Brian might have disappeared. And then it's got last seen, date, place, activity. So that's where you would put something about on a plane journey to the forest of Canada, blah, blah, blah.
What
Okay.
about the
And we know it was summer. Okay. She said what?
I think Kane said, what about the contact thing? I don't know. Contact cards?
Oh, if found, contact is at the very bottom. You could put like a police department, like a local police department where he used to live. You could put one of his parents' information on there. It's fake information, right? But you could make up a phone number or whatever. All right. So yes, I want you to do this whole poster. Do your best. Virtual kids, I know it's like, I don't even kind of expect you to be able to draw Brian using the Seesaw program. So I would say draw it on a piece of paper and then take a picture of it to submit, if I were you guys. So this is what we've got to work on then. You got about a half hour till math to work on this.
Can we listen to Kendall's song?
Oh,
yeah.
Listen to her song.
Okay. So that's what I've got for today. Do you guys have any questions?
No.
We good? All right. I'm going to hit stop record then, and you guys are good to go on this one.